All right. Welcome to this week's live office hours. Pretty good week, right? We got a new feature launch, something we've been wanting to work on for a while. And it kind of goes in alignment with what we've been talking about, like this life cycle of your products, right? And for context, if those of you watching have not listened to us talk about this, what we try to do as a company is give you frameworks for how to think through things. I think what happens, especially in the repricing world, is a lot of just here's a strategy, but you kind of need to take a step back and say, okay, well, in what ways should I be thinking about applying these to my inventory, right? Because a strategy is a simple tool, but we need to know what we're working on here. And so what we've kind of realized over the years is everybody, including your competition, is in a different phase of the same life cycle. And that life cycle starts pretty conservative, right? When you first come into stock, right? You care more about profitability than you do velocity for the most part. But as time goes on, you kind of become more aggressive, right? Long-term storage fees, sell inventory, your capital's tied up. And what we realize is a lot of sellers, when you create different strategies, you're basically creating a strategy for the most part to handle one of these phases. And to us, there's really like three major phases. And I'll walk through what those are in a minute, just for some more context. There's definitely exceptions where you need to create a strategy for a specific SKU, but we're not really talking about that, right? Today, we're talking big picture. And so we find that a lot of our users are having to go in once a week, look at all their inventory, and basically manually move their listings through these different phases. So we released a new workflow called Age of Inventory, which is fantastic. So what I thought would be cool, and we'll definitely dive into any questions anybody has. There's really no format here, but I want to showcase this because one, it's incredibly fast, and two, it takes a lot of the leftover work away from managing your Aura account. We're big fans of automation, so this kind of goes perfectly in alignment with it. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go through this together. We're going to build this, which is going to be super fun. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, perfect. Awesome. And we can see my screen. Awesome. Perfect. Okay, cool. So how do we do this, right? The challenge is doing this in a way that's not complicated. And so I think we've built this in that way really, really well. Now, the first thing that we always recommend for workflows, and if you're not familiar with workflows, it's basically an automated tool, right? It's you create your own automations in Aura. If you're familiar with Zapier, that's kind of where a lot of this inspiration came from. Now, the first thing we should have, if we have no workflows, first thing we want is a new listing workflow. What this is going to do is it's going to allow us to say, whenever a new listing gets imported, what do you want to do? Well, I probably want to set my default strategy. And for us, that's going to be level 1 Maven. And I'll go over these levels, these core 3 strategies in a bit. We do have a help doc that covers this really in depth, which is fantastic. So I might want to do that. And then I'll probably want to toggle repricing on. Or wrong one. Hold on. So I want that to be enabled. So when I do this, for every new listing that comes into my account, it's going to get the right starting strategy and it's going to enable repricing. Now, if I'm using something like an integration that's automatically pulling in my costs, my strategy is setting my mins for me automatically, then I really have nothing to do, right? I list my inventory the way I always have. Everything gets automatically imported and I'm repricing without having to touch a single thing. That's great. That's like a great starting point. It's a simple workflow. Now, let's say you want to start to manage things throughout that whole life cycle here. So let's take a look at that. And actually, hold on one second. I think I just noticed. Okay, cool. All right, so let's go ahead and create this life cycle workflow is what we're calling it. So we're going to create this from scratch, and we're going to say we're going to do this on a schedule, maybe once an hour. So every hour of every day, we're going to check this, right? Pretty straightforward so far. Now, this is where it gets fun. I want to use a filter block, and I want to filter on age of inventory. Now, let's say, for an example, let's give some context on this, right? What we want to do is we want to be able to change our strategies as the age of inventory is increasing, right? So we want to look at the highest age of inventory. So let's say what I want to do is I want level 1 to always be applied to listings that are, let's say, less than 30 days old. And then I want to go to level 2, which is a rule-based strategy, a little bit more aggressive, between 31 and 60 days. And then anything over 60 days, I want to liquidate. Okay, let's take a look at that. So to do that, we're going to say more than 0. So the logic here is kind of important. This just means 1 or more of units. Now we can definitely do less than, we can get crazy with it, but we're going to keep it simple for right now. We're going to use units instead of percentage. And then I'm just going to say, if my age of inventory is within 30 days, what do I want to do? Well, I want to set my strategy to level 1. This would be Maven. This would be our starting strategy. Now, the important part here is that we nest these. Super important. Shouldn't be like this. If you ever use a filter block, it should always have a nested action within it. Next thing, we're going to handle that 31 to 60 days, right? So we're going to add another filter block here. And same thing, but we're going to change it. So it's 30 to 60. So just in that bucket. And again, I'm going to set my strategy, but this time I'm going to go to level 2. So again, this becomes a little bit more aggressive. And again, I'm going to nest that. And then for anything older than that, I want to liquidate. So I'm going to take it from here. So basically 61 days or older. And then I want to set my strategy to my liquidation strategy. And again, I'm going to nest that. And that's it. That's the whole thing. So what's super interesting about this is it doesn't have to be complicated, right? This is the thing that makes it super exciting for us is it's a way to create these automations and offload a lot of the work that you're doing, which is super fun. So just to highlight this too, in this account, I'm gonna take everything to, we have this automatically running for testing, but I'm gonna take everything to none. So we're gonna basically take the strategy off of it. So that's all gone. Now, if I go back to that workflow, that lifecycle workflow, I'm just gonna manually trigger this real quick. So that's done. Awesome. I'm gonna go back to my listings and oh, look at that. Everything's exactly where it should be. That fast. And this is like a live actual account. So again, imagine taking a lot of that workload that you're used to doing, codifying it. And what I mean by that is turning it into a process. Write it down, right? When do you liquidate? And most people, it's based on age of inventory. Some people start to liquidate at 90 plus days. Great. Create that automation. Have it trigger every hour, every 3 hours, whatever makes sense. And then just let it ride. And what's so cool about the way this is built, you know, you're not always going to have inventory in the same age bucket, right? It's going to be spread in a lot of cases, especially if you're doing replens and things like that. So what's interesting about this is it's going to run linear through it, right? So it's always looking at applying the highest age of inventory strategy. So in this case, I might be liquidating because I have, you know, let's say 2 units in greater than 60 days. But if I have this triggered every hour, the moment I sell out of those 2 and it goes back to, let's say, less than 30 days, well, my strategy is now going to be updated to that first level, that level 1. And so now you don't just have this like become more aggressive over time. You can become less aggressive over time as well as your age of inventory is shifting around. Super cool stuff. But Casey, I'm going to let you handle the 3 core strategies in terms of like how we handle those things.
Yeah. And just to emphasize like the importance of this update, we all have the methodology that tools should make things easier for you and therefore cut down on manual work. That's what this release directly impacts, the ability to just automate your account as much as possible. But yeah, in regards to kind of our methodology around repricing those core 3 strategies that we just walked through and those stages that you most likely want to follow as your inventory does age. Obviously, specific time windows may vary depending on products, your specific business setup or whatnot. But I am just going to post that article in the comments for you folks. But essentially, that first bucket is going to be Maven. As we know, Maven's optimized for that balance between sales velocity and profit margin. So that's the best strategy to start with. Try to maximize on that margin without letting inventory sit there idle. But sometimes those items do still hit that 31-day-old mark. That's when you're going to want to just ship directly to the buy box. So just a little bit more aggressive, but not drastically undercutting the competition. Just trying to increase visibility of your offer on those listings by pricing slightly below that current buy box winner. And yep, here's that strategy that Dylan's sharing right there. Yeah. So once that inventory starts to age, you'll bump from Maven down to that buy box targeting strategy. And like I said, that'll just barely undercut that competition, try to give yourself a better chance of winning that buy box. But if you have an item that maybe is sitting around, hits that 60-day plus mark, maybe for some folks it's 90-day plus, whenever those fees start to get hit, that's when you're going to want to start thinking about liquidating that inventory to just recoup your initial investment, ideally break even. Sometimes you do have to take a little bit of a loss on some items, but that'll be shifting to that liquidation strategy there as well. So kind of treating your inventory and listings based on their health and stage is the best way to optimize performance in your account. And this age of inventory workflow just helps automate that for you, so you don't have to come in once a week, multiple times a week to manually make that change. It's just going to run in the background. And a couple things Dylan mentioned that I will just emphasize: if you want this to happen as frequently as possible, we'll recommend that 1 hour time mark. That'll just have Aura essentially check all those inventory ages once an hour, make the proper strategy adjustments accordingly. And then secondly, as you saw Dylan set that up, he started with Maven. Then the second step was phase 2, that buy box targeting strategy. And then that third step would be the liquidation strategy. Overall, workflows do work top to bottom. So that will be how you want to set that up. For example, if you were to set it as the inverse, stage 3, stage 2, then stage 1, if you had, let's say, for example, a listing that had multiple units in 60 days plus, but there were a few units in that 0 to 30 day age, with that first strategy being listed last, it would assign that to your first strategy. So just want to treat those top to bottom in terms of that inventory age there. We do have one help article published around creating that workflow, but we will have a second one with an accompanying video included as well, released by the end of the week. And that specific video and article will highlight the age of inventory workflow working hand in hand with our recommendations in terms of those core 3 strategies there.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned the frequency, right? Because when we talk to sellers, a lot of times they are doing it like once a week, maybe a few times a week. If that, some people are like, every few weeks, which I get it, right? Because it's another task to get done. But how much optimization are you missing out on because you're not doing it super frequently, right? And so I think by having this at least once a day, at minimum once a day, is probably good enough to have a massive increase, right? Because I was talking to one of our affiliate partners this morning, and just kind of, we're just kind of catching up, but then started talking about this age of inventory. He's like, man, you know what? This is so crazy because I have so much stuff that's just sitting there that I just haven't wanted to deal with. And this is so interesting as a concept, right? When you start getting into like the personal assistants and stuff like that, a lot of people talk about the mental hurdle of getting something done or spending money, right? Whereas a VA spending your money, they're not emotional about it. They're like, I'm just going to do what you told me to do, but you might put it off for however many weeks, months, because you're like, I just don't want to deal with it. It's kind of the same concept here, right? Which is, what if you didn't have to deal with it and it just got dealt with for you the way you designed it, the way you wanted it to, and you're not left in that partner's position, which is like, I know I should have dealt with this like months ago. I just haven't really wanted to. It's like, yeah, I get it. I've been there. But what if, he had to, and now he's like, I'm setting this up today, which is fantastic. But again, the more things I think you can automate in the business, I think the better. But where I think a lot of things kind of falter in the, automate the business is having tools that are able to be automated. That gets kind of difficult. And so what a lot of people do is they rely on VAs to basically manage the software as their form of automation. But that's expensive, right? That's human time. And I always think about the price of time. And obviously, yes, some people are more expensive than other people. VAs tend to be on the cheaper side, but Workflows is not an extra fee, which is crazy, right? So like you could take your VA off that entirely, and get better results for no additional money, which is, I think, fantastic. So I'm hoping we see more software in our space jump into this kind of concept of just like, okay, well, what are the workflows, which is why we call it workflows, that our users are consistently doing, and they've designed their own process for how they do it. And then how do we build functionality so we can say, hey, just tell us how you want it done, and we'll just go and do it for you. So I think it's a big deal. But yeah, we're super excited. This just launched on Monday. I'll be doing some actual like videos on this as well. And I'll be posting it on our Twitter, our X accounts, all that good stuff. And I'm probably going to write the blog for next week of like how to automate your repricer, because the two things we covered, you know, the new listing and then this new age of inventory workflow really handles, I would say 95% of any changes you need to make. Obviously there's always exceptions. They're just weird listings you need specific strategies for. But for the most part, it works really well. And, you know, what's nice is it's paired with Maven on the front end, the way we kind of say, hey, this is a best practice. So there's a lot less complexity. There's a lot of opportunity there in handling that for the end user. You're really just positioning yourself to be in the best possible position with doing far less work, which again, that gets me excited. So we've been getting really good. I can't speak today. I'm so excited. We've been getting really good reviews on this so far, which is fantastic. I've been watching the workflows creation, you know, in our analytics, and it's cool. We launch it and then immediately it jumps like 5x. So I think it makes workflows far more practical as well, which is good, more valuable.
Yeah, we always want to have you in general, and we have this methodology that you want to have your software work for you, not you work for your software. Obviously, this leads to just freeing up more time for you to not have to deal with the day-to-day management of your listings. You can actually invest more time in other areas. Typically, you know, sourcing takes the most amount of time and is really the most impactful thing you do, is having effective sourcing and buying or making an intelligent buy there. So really just freeing you guys up to do more of that stuff is really, really the main goal there. Ideally, every platform can be set and forget and be as optimized as possible. So this is a little bit of a step in that direction for us here.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point, right? Like you make money when you buy inventory, not when you sell it. And I've always loved the concept of, well, how do you design your business, your Amazon selling business, so that all you really had to do was focus on buying and shipping inventory. And then the moment it gets checked in and goes live, everything is handled for you, right? If you're doing private label, building your own brands, ideally you have some kind of like AI PPC, you know, advertising platform that just picks up new listings, does its own keyword research, understands some criteria you want to hit, and says, great, I'm going to start testing for you. What? That's amazing. And especially if you pair that with a prep center, now all you really have to do is worry about buying the inventory and you're kind of done. Outside of like, there's always, you know, obviously problems that crop up. I used to buy, when I did wholesale, these little gnome figurines, and they were amazing, but they notoriously broke. The moment they landed at the prep center, there was like 10 broken every single time, which was hilarious. We always joked about it. But outside of those exceptions, can you design it so that the whole sales process is basically just sorted out for you? And I think this release gets us much further along than any before for it. So very exciting.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, I know we kind of jumped right in. We're excited, but obviously this is open office hours, so there's no format here. So any questions you have could be general selling, could be repricing, could be Aura, could be this new feature. We'd love to answer any questions you have, dive deeper into any rabbit holes you want to go down. Definitely fun for us. But, you know, kind of gearing up for 2025, I feel like it came here super fast. I'm already seeing a lot of sellers kind of shifting their mindset a bit. And I wrote a blog post that got released this Monday, which was like my 4 bold predictions, if you will. And I think it'd be kind of fun to cover those because, you know, there's some good stuff that I think people don't really realize or notice that seem kind of relatively obvious to me. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to walk through this. Okay. So first one, Walmart optimism falls. I made a tweet about this and it actually kind of blew up, which was nice. You have a lot of sellers that have gotten frustrated with Amazon. And so they hear good things about Walmart, they wholesale jump over. The thing you have to keep in mind is that new platforms are going to use unsustainable incentives. So think fees. Why? Because that's how you gain traction. You make it very seductive, if you will, for lack of a better term, to sell there. Eventually, they will gain enough traction and reach enough scale to where that will change. So if you're thinking Walmart is the greener pasture, I have a castle to sell you somewhere, right? Like, it is good in a lot of ways, but every platform has its pros and cons. And so what I'm trying to get people to understand is, I think what's going to happen is we get into this year, people really are gunning for Walmart. A lot of things are going to evolve and change there for good or for worse. And that optimism that Walmart's amazing is going to change, because guess the comments about early Amazon is the exact same thing. So every platform is going to mature over time. Now, that's not to say Walmart is bad. Certainly not what I'm saying, but I think there's this big sentiment of just Walmart is better. And I think that misses the nuance of selling multi-channel, which is what I think the future of being a reseller is. I think you're going to be selling on multiple channels. You're going to be getting massive velocity from Amazon. You're going to be getting more profitability from Walmart, and you're going to find a way to maximize both of those rather than being on one platform. That obviously reduces some platform risk. So if something were to happen on either platform, you have that alternative. But I think we're moving quickly past the have a second platform as a fail-safe, and more so seeing the opportunity of selling on multi-channels. So I think that's like the first thing that I think we'll see this year. Next one, if you've ever heard me speak or even whisper, I think AI agents become a massive thing. I won't go super deep into that, but I think this becomes a massive deal. Now, number 3 is interesting. I think Amazon does become friendlier. We're already seeing this with them not increasing their fees for 2025. My thought on this is that Walmart is actually competing with Amazon. And I don't think anybody really thought that they would, but they are gunning it. And I think they're doing a good job. There's a lot of things they need to figure out. It's not perfect, but again, I think they're doing a good job. And if you look at some of my past blog posts or tweets about Amazon being under regulatory pressure, you can kind of understand why Amazon has made certain decisions against sellers that have hurt sellers. And I don't think they want to be doing that. Nobody at Amazon's like, we should make life horrible for sellers. That's not the mindset there. But there are things that are going to force their hand. Now, with this added competition landscape, I think now they're going to start seeing a lot of sellers move over to Walmart. And I think they're going to want to start to battle for your inventory, which I think in the short term is going to be possibly painful in some way. I don't know how, but that's going to be complicated. But I think in the long term, that's a good thing for sellers. You want these platforms competing for your business, not a where else are you going to go? And so I think in the long term, this is a great thing. And I think it further forces Amazon's hand to make it a better platform for you. And I know they want to, but I think this added competitor landscape kind of pushes that further, which again, good thing. And then, I wrote a blog post about the exponential seller. This just goes into some of the younger sellers that I'm seeing and how they operate. Slightly different. They're more tech savvy. They want more software, not less software. They're looking at things like AI and how to utilize it in some way, shape, or form. I do think that being tech savvy is a competitive advantage for sellers. And I don't just mean what software stack are you using. What I mean is being data driven, is seeing all this crazy complexity and being able to thrive off of it rather than having it weigh you down. I think any seller could become an exponential seller, but I do think that we'll start to see some of these come through. The barriers to entry, the friction of scaling businesses is very quickly changing. And so I think this is going to be a big deal. I think this goes hand in hand with the AI conversation, but for the most part, these are like the 4 big things I think are going to happen this year. We'll see. I'm curious to kind of circle back at the end of this year and be like, how on point was I? How completely wrong was I? We'll certainly find out quickly, but I think there's a lot of good things that are happening in the market for resellers right now. And historically, it's gotten harder and harder. I think this year we'll see that revert a bit. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, I think points 1 and 3 and 2 and 4 kind of work hand in hand. Obviously,
Yeah.
Walmart's bending over backwards to try and get folks over onto their marketplace. I listen to a handful of podcasts, and I'm starting to get Walmart ads, not even to purchase on Walmart, but to be a
Right.
seller on Walmart via just a podcast. And this podcast, for context, has nothing to do with selling on Amazon, on
Yeah.
any platform at all. So they're just
Right.
pumping money into ads, trying to make it advertising and appealing to folks. And like Dylan mentioned, I mean, they're going to start with unsustainable benefits to try and get you folks over
Right.
into their ecosystem. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I think what Dylan mentioned is really important. Being multi-channel is the future. I think
Mhm.
completely shifting over to Walmart in its entirety might be a little bit
Premature or naive.
premature. Yeah, premature is
Yeah.
exactly the word I was looking for there. Because once they start to have a decent cohort of sellers, they're then going to start implementing those fees, implementing things that are going to start to benefit them over the seller community itself. And I think also the timing by Walmart is pretty perfect. I know we talked about the lawsuit that hit Amazon over the summer, where they were found liable for items sold by third-party sellers that were
Yeah.
faulty in whatever description of that term applies. And so coming off of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, the holiday season, Amazon had like an all-time high in terms of deactivations, them being a little bit overly aggressive and shutting folks' accounts down.
Yeah.
So I think Walmart's response is really timely on their part, and really a smart play to kind of pump all their focus and all that extra ad money in that area right now.
Yep.
But like your prediction, I think Walmart will eventually start to benefit themselves a little bit more. And then in turn, back on point number 3 in that blog, that's Amazon's going to respond. I mean, we've already seen them respond by not implementing additional fees for this year.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if they do some sort of promotional or something to help sellers on the day-to-day side of things.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, I mean, we talk about using AI tools all the time on this.
Probably too much.
Not too much. I mean, I think being technically savvy is a drastic advantage really in any area of today's world that we live in. That's just inherent in how people operate. So being able to leverage specifically AI will let you grow exponentially. So yeah, I would probably double down on all 4 of those predictions, and you could almost make them 2 predictions, with 1 and 3 being one and 2 and 4 being another.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how the overall selling space evolves this year as
Right.
speed bumps start to come up on Walmart's side. Amazon tries to respond. Yeah, it'll be really,
Mhm.
really fun little bit of wild, wild west going on here.
Yeah. And everybody I talk to about Walmart, they're like, please go to the meetup that they have every year in fall. It's incredible. The developers are there, which is cool. I mean, you can tell that they're trying here. And they recently updated their brand, not a ton. There's kind of the meme of Pam in the office being like, it's the same picture. But what's interesting is it seems like they're trying to target a younger generation. Some of the ads I'm getting are really millennial based, and I'm millennial generation. The shows that they're partnering with for ads, Gilmore Girls, stuff like that. Like, I think they've realized that Amazon has really owned that younger generation. Walmart has owned the older generation, but as they're aging out, they're going to have to adapt. And my generation, I can only speak for myself, but I don't think, let me go look at Walmart for this. Let me go to Amazon. But it looks like they're pushing really hard to change that. So it's like they're repositioning themselves in terms of like who they target, how they target. So it seems like they're really pushing on the shop online with us to the younger generations. And if you're a seller, you should be selling here and we'll make it awesome for you. So they're doing a lot, which is awesome. It's really great to see. But yeah, I think this year is going to be a big year for a lot of sellers having to think through, how big of a business do you want? Does multi-channel make sense for you? How does it make sense for you? And I think the big question for me is, how do you maximize the opportunity for selling multi-channel? Right? Because now you're going to have this problem where, you have to decide what percentage of your inventory is going to go to Walmart versus Amazon. I think the naive approach is to say, well, I usually order 2,000 units a month of this SKU. I'm going to take a percentage over there. I don't think that's right. I think what you need to do is be maximizing the volume on both channels, which means ideally you're spending a lot more. But what's cool is you're not having to, double your SKU count, right? You're just spreading it further. And so for a lot of sellers that are trying to scale and they're struggling finding more and more inventory to carry, well, what happens when you could just buy more of the same inventory and put it on a different platform and increase your revenue, your sales by 20% with relative ease? Like that, there's a lot here that I think a lot of sellers are missing out on, especially those, again, going from Amazon to Walmart entirely. Listen, I get it. Section 3s are rough. Fees are rough. But the reality of it is that's where the volume's at. And and we've always said over, past 10 years, Walmart's a volume game. It's not just about, a lot in the early days basically when it was just Amazon and eBay, people were like, oh, I make tons of money on eBay. My profit margin's massive. I'm like, yeah, but you can only move 1/10 of the volume in the same period of time as you can on Amazon. And I'm not saying, you should switch 100% to Amazon, but when you understand the game that you're playing on that platform, it changes your perspective, because it's not about getting 80, 200% ROIs. It's about getting a solid, 20 to 60% ROI, but doing it at massive scale. And so I think a lot of sellers get stuck in this, well, what's the ROI or what's the profit margin? That's not the whole equation though, right? Like, yeah, I could take, SKU A, 100% ROI, but let's say I can only move 50 units a month. Like that's the cap. Okay, well that ROI isolated looks good, but if I go from 100% ROI to 50% ROI, but I can move 1,000 units a month, in which did I make more dollars? Well, obviously the second. And so I think you're going to have to start thinking through this kind of lens, right? Which I think you should have been thinking through this lens on Amazon anyways, but now it's kind of forcing you to think through this lens. But I think it's going to be really, really fun personally. Let's see, Carlos. I just started selling on Amazon in June of 2024. Would you recommend opening a Walmart seller account or stick and grow first with Amazon? What would you do? I guess I have FOMO. Yeah, this is such a great question because I feel like a lot of sellers hit this. My previous recommendations years ago, before Walmart really started to grow, was unless you have really tapped the Amazon marketplace, I don't think it's worth you going and setting up another channel. I feel like it distracts more than it helps. Now, that was prior to Section 3s and a bunch of risk. So with you having just started, I would probably hold off on Walmart a little bit longer, because the things you're learning on Amazon will apply to Walmart in some way, shape, or form. So I don't know if there's like a right answer here for like when you should, but I think once you have a solid business and you have enough cash to keep growing, because here's a good way to think about this. Let's say you're spending 100% of your cash. It's all going to Amazon. You can barely keep up with your growth. Basically, your growth is capped based on how much capital you can put back into the business. Adding another channel, another platform is going to make that a harder problem for you. So the way I would personally think about it is, how much cash do I have available and how much can I really spend? Because if I'm tapping out, if I get a payout on Tuesday and I've spent it all by Wednesday, I'm probably not looking at Walmart quite yet, because where's the capital coming from? So, because now I'm trading the opportunity of spending quickly and selling quickly on Amazon to go sell less quickly on Walmart, which is for you a big unknown because you haven't sold on the platform yet. So I would wait until you have a little bit of capital that makes sense. I wish there was a more succinct way I could say that. But basically, if you're still cranking on Amazon and you're spending it as fast as it's coming back, I would keep on with Amazon. But once you have a sizable account, now you have to start thinking about protecting yourself too. I was talking to somebody, I think in an Uber, about this the other day, actually, about how a lot of people will build a business and they just go ham because you have to. That's what it takes. But eventually you have a valuable asset. And now you need to start thinking about protecting the asset. And we've talked about this on office hours before about having like an emergency fund. That's one way, but also going multi-channel reduces something called platform risk. Because if your whole business sits on top of Amazon and you get a Section 3, you're down. Now, good solution there is have enough cash in the bank to be able to say, I've got 3 months to figure this out and I'm okay. Another way is diversification of your platforms. So I think sellers doing like 10 grand a month, 15, 20 grand a month, I don't really think it's worth it at that point. But honestly, like, let's say the moment you're doing this full time, like this is your full income. Now you want to start protecting what you have. If you're doing this and still working a job that's paying your bills, I would wait personally, because like there's really not much down risk for you. That would be my recommendation. So FOMO will always be here. I love FOMO. What used to be the go-to FOMO was business model type. And it's like, oh, well, I'm doing OA. I see people making $1 million a month doing RA, or $1 million a month doing wholesale or private label or Kindle direct publishing. I've always said you can make $1 million, and there's always an example of somebody making $1 million in every type of business model. You really got to pick one that works with your strengths and stick to it and scale it. So there's always going to be some kind of form of FOMO in the world of business. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I was going to really emphasize kind of the emergency fund theory.
Yeah.
If I would definitely ensure, especially if you are in early stages on Amazon, that you do have some sort of emergency fund for your business. Obviously, mitigating platform risk is great, but also getting up and running on another platform simultaneously does carry its own form of risk. So I would definitely emphasize, as long as you're protected on your end, whenever you feel like you can start to slide a portion of that over, growing a business in any form requires initial investment. So if you feel like you can make that initial investment while also still protecting the Amazon portion of things, that's maybe the point that I would wait until to kind of start diversifying that profile. But yeah, other than that, I think you definitely nailed it there.
Nice. See, Ron, I just started in December. Welcome to the craziness. I'm currently doing 100% FBM. Is the repricing as valuable to me as an FBM seller as it would be if I was selling FBA? I will go FBA at some point, probably, just wondering. So yes, so you should still be repricing with FBM, 1000%. What's cool is, especially with Maven, it understands what offer type you are and your competition's offer type. So it will factor those things in for you. Repricing is better than not repricing, pretty much no matter how you look at it. So yes, it will still be valuable for you. I think you should still start a trial and get set up there. We're definitely here to help. We have a bunch of best practices as well. So if you're like, hey, I really need like a solid FBM strategy, let us know in live chat. We're super happy to help develop strategies and all that stuff for you. I will say, with you starting in December, going FBM made a ton of sense. So good on you for not trying to go FBA in December. I think that was probably the best decision you could have ever made outside of just starting the business. But now that we're in Q1, I would urge you, keep maximizing your FBM stuff, but start to look at FBA. FBA is going to crush it Q1, 2, and for the most part, all of 3. Once you get into Q4, where you can't really ship into FBA in time, that's when FBM starts to really do well. So I know a lot of sellers, or at least I see a decent amount of sellers, do FBA or FBM because that's kind of what they're used to, especially if they're coming from eBay and stuff like that. It's a big missed opportunity, in my opinion, to stay FBA. Doesn't mean that you should get rid of it, but really understand when should you triple down on FBM and when should you not. I think, having a small portion of each of your SKUs in FBM to kind of pad the margins, probably not a bad idea. Maybe take 10, 20, 30% of your inventory for each SKU and say, I'm going to segment that for FBM so that I can get a higher profit margin, is probably a good idea. So again, when we're talking this diversification, it applies everywhere. I didn't like FBM myself because it was a lot of manual work, and I didn't have the time to do it. But if you do, I think it's a good thing. So I think you're in a really good position here. But yes, Aura will absolutely be able to help you with the FBM side of things.
Yeah, and I would just say repricing is essential regardless of your business setup, just because bottom line, if we boil everything down, it's going to automate you being competitive on your listings. You
Yeah,
never want to have to you never want to have an offer that you're unaware of because you haven't checked on it in 3 days, 5 days, a week, whatever it may be.
right.
And oh no, you're $6 higher than the buy box winner, than the next offer, whatever it may be. So just having repricing to keep you in play, ideally win the buy box in most scenarios, that's going to be where the value in repricing comes in, between keeping you competitive and freeing up time elsewhere. So yeah, repricing really is essential. If you have maybe 2 listings, I would say maybe not, but outside of that, you're definitely going to want to make sure that you have an automated repricer set up to free yourself in those other
Yeah,
areas.
1000%. See, Carlos, thank you for the answer. Does a retainer service count as a way to protect your business? Can you clarify? I'm not sure what a retainer service is. Just clarify what you mean by that. Because where my mind immediately goes to is an emergency fund, right? Like if you got 3 months of operating cash in the bank, do you think you can solve most of your, 90% of the problems of the business in 90 days? Probably yes. That tends to be pretty much good. But it does pay me when somebody says, hey, if I can't get my account back in 2 weeks, I have to shut down the business because I can't operate. That you do not want to be in that position, especially if it's paying your bills and you're living off of it. That's not a good thing to be in. But yeah, Carlos, if you would please clarify what you mean in the comment section about a retainer service. I have not heard of this, but it sounds very interesting. I will say that. It's funny when you build a business and now there's insurance and all these kind of different things. It's like, man, like you're paying that cash out and it's not working for you, but it is protecting you. And, I go back and forth with like the whole health insurance thing. It's like, should we have to? It's like, yeah, but it doesn't seem great until you need it. And you're like, oh, thank gosh, I had it. Like it's insurance for a reason, right? It is ensuring that you'll be okay in like the craziest situations.
Yep.
Oh, Joshua, he thinks he means having a lawyer on retainer. Less so, to be honest. Now, I think it's good to have a solid network. Or hold on, here we go. It's like an insurance just in case your account gets shut down. There's a group of lawyers that will help you get your account back. Okay, yeah. So we're talking the same thing here. I think that's okay to have, depending on the cost of that. So I think it's always good to have in your network people who can help get you out of a jam when it happens. Do you necessarily need to have those people on retainer? I'm not sure. There are definitely services that will help sort that for you for a fee, and you don't have to pay a retainer. I'm unsure if the insurance model makes sense here. Now, if they're like, hey, you pay this premium, and then if you go down, we pay X per week to keep you afloat, maybe, I'd have to think about that a little bit more. But the way I think about it is, well, if I can make one phone call or send one email and then a week later be back up and running for a flat fee, do I really need to be paying insurance? Like it kind of comes down to the cost of that, right? Like if I paid in $5,000 and then it happens, okay. But if I didn't pay the $5,000 and then I could pay $1,000 to have somebody fix it for me in a pretty timely fashion, did I need to spend the $5,000? I don't know. I guess I'm telling myself no, but it really just depends on what's available. But there are some good services out there that people talk about online that help basically recover your account. But yeah, I'm hesitant with the insurance model on that. There's a lot of insurance companies being created in areas that I don't think you necessarily need insurance, because the cost when it does happen is actually not super high. Like health insurance makes a lot of sense because I can go to the ER and that's $20,000. Yeah, I'd rather pay $1,000 and $300 a month in premium to not have to do that out of pocket. But for a lot of these things, I don't think it has to be super expensive. Okay, so Joshua, I do it and it's like $100 a month, which I think is worth it because they charge thousands of dollars without it. Okay, cool. So that's good to know. Yeah. And that's kind of where my disconnect is. Like what's the premium? And then like, how much would it cost to just have them do it? Yeah. Okay. So that's probably not a bad deal then. Especially if they can do it timely. So $100 a month, that's not too bad. Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, Joshua. Yeah, $100 a month, not too bad at all.
Yeah, the way I kind of justify like the insurance model in my head is like if it's cheaper to pay for it per month for the entire year than it would be to pay for it once, then it's worth it. Because
Oh, interesting.
God forbid something happens once a year, like
Yeah.
it's going to be cheaper than if you pay all or if you paid for it one off. That's kind of how I think of things. I
Yeah.
felt the same way about health insurance, and then
Yeah.
had to have a couple impromptu surgeries a couple of years ago, which would have been much more costly had I not had that insurance. So
Yeah, I did not want health insurance until I hit my 30s and went to the ER a few times with some random stuff. I'm like, oh, maybe I should still keep this. So I think we all go through that at a younger age where it's just like, why am I wasting all this money? It's not going to be that expensive. I'd never go to the doctor. And then you hit 30, it's like, actually, you're going to the ER a few times now. You're like, all right, great. Yeah. Oh, Carlos. Yeah, exactly. So $1,200 per year versus $5,000 for one time, $5,000 to recover your account. That's actually really interesting. I was expecting $1,000 to $2,000 for recovery. 5 seems kind of steep just at first glance. But yeah, $1,200 per year versus $5K one time. Yeah, that doesn't sound like a bad deal. Looks like they've got a pretty good model in place there. It's always nice when the math works out, you know. So sometimes these insurance companies that get created, especially like these niche ones, when you run the math, you're like, that doesn't actually, there's no value here. Yeah. Interesting. I am curious when we get to a point where we can have an AI agent that you're just like, hey, my account got shut down. And it's like, great, give me $500 and 48 hours. I'll figure it out for you. And it just does it for you. All the things the lawyers are doing and all that stuff. Because that's the interesting part, right? There's clearly a process to make it work. And I imagine there's a bunch of nuances and decision trees and stuff like that. But if these guys have it down where like they can recover, let's say 70, 80% of the accounts that they work with. Yeah, man, we could do it. We could definitely do it. It might be against TOS, but you know, I was thinking about reimbursement services, right? I was like, oh, why is there no agentic software that does it for you? Because right now it's an army of VAs in the Philippines and India and the Ukraine that are doing this manually for you. And I was talking with one of the reimbursement companies, and they're like, and I asked them that, they're like, well, it's highly against TOS. It has to be done manually. I was like, oh, that's so frustrating when regulations hold back innovation. But I think we'll slowly get there.
Yeah, I forget where I heard it. I can't remember if it was a comedian or just someone on a podcast, but they're like, yeah, lawyers get paid because they read fast and they read all the fine print. So if you find a tool that can read fast for you,
yeah,
you can probably cut out some of that cost. But yeah, TOS is always a hurdle you typically want to make sure you clear properly so you don't run into other issues there.
Especially when your entire business sits on top of that TOS. You should probably understand and work within it. Nice. So we got about 12 minutes left here. Appreciate the amazing questions. Keep those coming. We definitely want to make the most of your time here and provide the most value. If you missed the beginning of the conversation with us geeking out about Age of Inventory workflows, go back. This is recorded. You can go back and rewatch that, ask questions. We have help docs on how to set it up properly and some best practices that I think will be helpful. But as I mentioned, this week, I'll be creating some basically what I just went over, but more succinct of like, here's how to create it. Here's how to think through it. I'll have some of those videos and we'll be sharing those on our social media channels for everybody to be able to see how easy it is. Because I know it's easy to be like, oh, huge new feature. And then you jump in and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming and complicated. In this case, it's not. And it's so exciting. So I really want how fast it is to set these things up, how easy it is to set these things up and the value that they provide. So I think it's going to be fantastic. So I'll make sure to have those out sometime this week for everyone as well.
Yeah, we should have a video accompanying at least one of those 2 help docs by the end of the week. So you'll get to see my shining face walking you through that process there. But I know we started the portion or today's call kind of sharing our screen, going through the platform, being a little bit more hands-on. We're always more than happy to do that. So if you folks have any, themes you want to cover, general areas of the platform you want to cover, always feel free to come either into chat or into the comments section here. We can always bookmark it for next week, or if there's time to jump into it during that live office hours, we can do it then as well. But we're always looking for topics, subjects, themes that are going to be most helpful and most impactful for you folks. So don't ever hesitate to reach out with a suggestion or a request in terms of a topic for us to cover for you.
Yeah. Nice. So we got 10 minutes left. Any last minute questions, any things we could dive deep into? We are more than happy to answer. But it's exciting to get back to doing this every single week after the holidays. It kind of threw me off. I was like, every Wednesday at 2 p.m., I'm like, I feel like I should be doing something. So it's exciting to be back and be doing these again. We got a lot of future releases coming out, which we're very excited for. So a lot of good stuff. This is definitely a first Catalyst feature that we're coming out with that will lead to many, many more. So it's going to be exciting 2025 for us over here at Aura. And if you're not using us, I highly recommend you try us. It's a free trial. We don't ask for a credit card. Get a personal onboarding session. It's like 20 minutes long. It's free. It's personalized. Like, it's not super time consuming. We're actually in your account talking with you. So it's not just like you leave with a massive list of next action items. If we're talking about these 3 strategies, we'll add it there live in your account. So when you leave that 20, 25 minute session, you're actively repricing in the best way possible, which is, I don't want to understate that. And that's all before you giving us a credit card, which I think is important. Make sure no matter what tool you go for, you're able to see the value before you give over your hard-earned cash. Super, super important there. But if there's no additional questions, we'll hang out for a few minutes. If there's no additional questions, we'll wrap up for time.
Yeah, and one I guess announcement as well, kind of building off what Dylan said, us missing the last few office hours. Those are obviously due to holidays, so we are excited to be back every Wednesday moving forward. If we ever go to cancel, you'll receive an email at least a day in advance letting you know that we won't be doing office hours. But on that note, we are out of the office this coming Monday for MLK Day, so support will not be live. We'll still monitor critical systems, obviously make sure no major issues are happening overall with the platform, but typical support will resume on Tuesday. There will be an in-app reminder on Monday and also an email going out tomorrow with more details around that limited support, but just wanted to make that announcement here. When support resumes, we'll take those tickets as they came in to make sure everyone's handled and up to speed or taken care of there.
Yeah. And maybe one thing to leave off on, what are you most excited for this year in 2025 as a seller? I'm curious what everybody else is thinking. What's your sentiment? What are you excited about? What changes are you making? There's a lot going into a new year that kind of makes you want to pause and reflect and think through, what's this year going to be like? What am I going to do differently? What am I excited about? What's changing around me in the industry that is my new opportunity? I'm curious. Go ahead and throw those in the comments if you have any. I did not do my annual review this year. Holidays were crazy. I've not yet got to it. So I say that slightly hypocritical. All right. Well, I think that's going to be it for today then. We'll go ahead and wrap up here for time. Again, thanks everyone for making the time to join us. This has been fantastic. Great questions in here too. Some stuff that we really don't get asked that often, which I think was fantastic for us. Get to dive into some new stuff. Again, we do this every Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. EST, unless we otherwise tell you. And this is just open office hours. There's really no format. We're just here to answer any questions you have, geek out with you, and make sure that you're best set up to succeed as a seller. That's really all this is about. So appreciate it. See, Carlos, I'm learning a lot and excited to grow. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Carlos. Thanks. Awesome. Cool. Well, with that, we will see you guys next week. Don't hesitate to reach out to support. You're going to talk with Casey here, or you're going to talk with Finn. Live chats in the bottom right blue button on any webpage for Aura. You can jump in there, start to have a conversation with us. No question is not good enough. If you're just like, I have a random idea, or just this little thing's been burning my brain, ask us. We're here to help. I joke that you should be abusing my team. I say that tongue in cheek, but our team is actually here and they're fantastic. So if you haven't scheduled an onboarding session, please do so. Again, it's free. I don't care if you've been with us for 2 years and you haven't scheduled one, schedule one. It's free. Everybody gets one. And if you're not using Aura and you're curious about it, come join us. Come have a conversation with us. We'd love to have you on board. I think 2025 is going to be a big year for a lot of sellers, and you want to be best positioned to make the most out of that. So with that, we will let you get back to the rest of your day.
Yeah, have a good
Bye,
week,
everyone.
everybody.